going to discuss in this episode what you need to look for if you're looking to do either one, to make sure that you're not in a situation where you're in over your head and you can't pay your bills. And if you're lucky enough to sell it for a profit when you're done.
I'm Dennis.
And I'm Greg,
And this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast,
where we provide the tools for more profit and less stress in your business now so you can turn into a valuable asset later.
Revenue is not like, there's an adage that says sales solves all wounds. It's one of the biggest misnomers I think that gets preached, and the guys that preach it know what they mean, but they're not telling you what they really mean. Profitable sales, we're talking gross margin on good sales, can cure a lot of wounds if the gross margin's in the correct calculation. So you got to know what your gross margin is, and for a lot of people listening to this, that's going to be a mystical word. I would just say go Google it. You'll understand what it means a lot cleaner. Because you can have businesses that are doing $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million in revenue that are still broke. And you think to yourself, well, why would they be broke? They've got so much revenue. Well, because their numbers are so far off.
Yeah.
And then there's, depending on the industry you go into, things change. Like you have a retail background, that there's percentages of dollars you need to dedicate to different things in your expenses, that if you exceed those percentages, you're in a very dangerous position of the whole boat just failing.
Absolutely.
Like, what was the payroll percentage in retail? Like 15%?
On the high side, and every retail industry will be different. Obviously.
Every business is different.
Correct. But a good target range for us was always, if you can hit around 10% wages at the store level.
Right.
So if you've got a bunch of stores and you have a head office is different. But at the store level, give or take 10%, you're probably going to be okay. 15's on the high side, but you can get so to the point of a gross margin, you can get away with 15 if you're a business where your gross margin's a lot higher. So let's just take a store. Like we were in sporting goods, right? We were in branded sporting goods. So we would buy from brands and sell to the customer. Well, those margins would be, if you're doing a really good job, 42, 45%, give or take.
Just to clarify margins, it's the difference between what I bought it for and what I sold it for. Right. So the take between the sale price and the buy price is 45%.
Right.
But the markup on something like that is 90 to 100%.
Right.
Different things. So when we're talking about taking margin, it's after I sell it to the customer and I pay the thing back, how much of that dollar do I get to keep before my expenses?
Yeah.
So when he's saying 45%, he's saying, well, if I only get to keep on a $100 item $45, well, then I'm going to be dedicating no more than $15 of that 45 to cover payroll.
Yeah.
To make sure I have enough left of that 30
yeah.
to pay for everything else, like my rent and
exactly.
power bills and
exactly. So you look at, I guess this is actually a good conversation for those who want to kind of understand some numbers on this, but like in a traditional retail store, like say sporting goods or fashion or whatever widget they're selling, probably on the low end, you might see 40% for like independent kind of stores. On the high end, they'd be lucky if they're hitting 50. Again, if they're buying from a vendor and selling to the customer, which different story would be if they're manufacturing their own.
Right.
Which we can
again,
talk about
different
that in a
businesses,
second.
different ratios, different everything.
So if they're buying from a company and they're selling to the customer, somewhere between 40 and 45 is probably going to be their margin, probably. Which means, back to the wage question, if you can, if you pay 15% of wages and you want to make 10 or 15% profit, say you want to be really aggressive and make 15% profit. So 15 to wages, 15 to profit, that's 30. If your margin's only 40, you got 10% left.
Cover all your overhead.
Yeah, rent. And a good retailer would roughly be around 10% rent. So now you got nothing left for marketing, accounting, bookkeeping, air conditioning, heating, whatever, all those other expenses.
And if you haven't planned for it, then even though think you set aside the profit, the government comes in and says, well, I want this chunk, but you probably haven't saved up for that chunk.
Right.
So now you're into the bank to borrow money to go pay off that chunk
exactly.
at high interest rates. And then you end up in this snowball effect of kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
So like whether you're buying a business or starting a business, the things to think about, number one is, do you even know the game you're getting into before you start to play? And I think most people have no idea the game they're going to play before they get into it. They just think, well, as we talked about before, I'm a good plumber, I'm a good whatever. I'm just going to go start the thing because if I'm good here, I got to be good at that thing. It's two completely different animals.
Totally.
So if you're not prepared for and understand how the numbers actually work. So if we're saying things like gross profit, gross margin, net profit, you don't know the differences, educate before you go play.
We should do a podcast on gross margin.
See if we can overwhelm people with the simplification of a complex topic.
But to your point, it's a complex topic, and it's worth giving more education on it for sure, so people can understand it. I don't know, in my opinion anyway, from my experience, I think understanding what your gross margin percent needs to be. And by the way, we call it, or I call it gross margin anyway, because I come from retail, but a lot of people call it gross profit.
Oh, but gross profit, net profit. People don't know the differences between those two words anyway.
So it's a good point. Explain
that.
I
had a conversation with, I was at a networking event, and I was talking with a roofer who did $1 million that year in sales. I said, so how'd you guys do? He said, we did great. We did over $1 million in sales. And I said, that's awesome. What'd you guys net?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, 30%.
We did over $1 million in sales.
Yeah. No, but I actually asked him, what did you net? And he goes, 30%. And I went, well, you couldn't have net, in my mind, I went, bullshit. You couldn't have net 30% because the average, guys, you can look this up, average profit on a company is maybe 5.
Yeah, maybe.
So if he's doing 30, he's doing phenomenally better than everybody else. So I went, okay, well, how did you get to 30%? He said, oh, it's easy. I just take whatever I have in labor costs and whatever I have in material costs, and I mark it up 30%. So I'm like,
two problems
already. So I said to him, okay, so what you're telling me is you marked it up 30%. And again, this is going to confuse listeners a little bit. You might have listened a few times, but
we will do a podcast on this subject.
You marked it up 30%, which is really closer to a 24% margin. So a markup is what I add, but a margin is the difference between what I get to keep. So on $1 million, you cleared maybe $250,000. That gives you $16,000 to $20,000 a month on average to cover all of your overhead.
Yeah.
Well, his rent was $5,000 or $6,000. He was pulling in $8,000 from himself, and his business partner was pulling in $8,000. I'm like, you guys didn't make any money.
You're losing money.
Right. And so he looked at me, and he turned around and he walked away.
Nice.
He didn't know what to do with the conversation.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who had been in business in roofing already for 15 years.
You can speak for yourself here, but I know we're on the same page with this passion. That conversation is exactly why we do what we do, because that's way too common. Like it's an epidemic. It's back to the point of 80 or 90% fail. That's a perfect example and story of why. And are they willing to make the tough decision? Well, first, are they willing to even understand? Are they failing? Somebody like that, maybe he's putting, I'm going to take a guess based on what you just said and say he might have been putting 60, 75 grand a year in his pocket between wage and loss of profit, because he's probably losing money profit wise. So he probably couldn't even pay himself a fair market wage. So, he thinks, hey, I'm making 60 grand a year and $1 million. Next year will be better. Knock on, it'll be better.
I'll go sell more.
Yeah.
We need a really good spring.
Exactly.
Yeah. We got to increase the revenue by 25%, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
But we're just going to do that tomorrow. I don't know what his whole story is. All I know is it doesn't seem to matter what level of revenue most companies get to. Their profitability is so tight that they're always trying to figure out how it is that they're not going to eat, or they're going to eat more than just macaroni and cheese and provide for the family.
Right.
But yet the problem I run into in the business world is people look at the icons in business, like the guys who are like the Jeff Bezoses from the Amazons, the Steve Jobs from the Apples. You take a look at a lot of these figures who've made a lot of money, and people go, well, I can go do the same thing in business, not realizing that those guys are the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah.
It's like when you start hockey, you start in Little League, and you got to be the best of the Little League to make it up anywhere that's substantial. And then you get to the juniors, and now you got to be the best of those guys to even get a shot to get scouted. And then once you get scouted, you got to be the best of those guys to get a placement in the NHL. And now you're in the NHL that doesn't even mean people care about your card.
Yeah.
Because you're still not at the top of the level. So you have in hockey, the 1%ers, the 1%ers. That's what these guys are in business.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to get there. In fact, if everybody got there, they wouldn't be the 1%ers of the 1%.